and I worked at that bar for like 4 years, and that was while I sort of made the jump from runner to camera assistant, and then started shooting my own little bits. And that was just to kind of supplement my income and keep me afloat. I mean, I probably could have left it sooner than I did, but they were always quite good to me and understanding with sort of what I wanted to do career-wise, and gave me time off. And I felt like, you know, they've looked after me, so I'm going to look after them. So that's a fair point. It's always helpful to have a flexible part-time job when you're starting out, because it just takes a little bit of that pressure off. You've got a bit of reliable money coming in until you've really solidified certain foundations of your career.
At what point in freelancing should you quit your other job? Right now is the answer that
I can't say that because I don't know your situation. It's really up to you. I think the key considerations are, am I making enough money freelancing to survive?
Damn it.
There we go. So, I mean, really, you want to look at like your past 6 months, your past year, and go, how much have I made? Can I live off that? If the answer is yes, sack off that job. If the answer is no, stick it out a bit longer, but then use that as a driving force to keep up with the freelance and keep finding more work. Because it is really slow to start. I mean, for me, I think my first year of freelance, I had 6 jobs in a whole year. Absolute crap, nothing. Whereas, you know, it's slowly built up from there to be busier and busier and more going on. And now I'm working all the time, most of the time.
When you were still at the bar,
yeah,
balancing both, did you rent your own place to live, or did you live for free?
No, I lived with family. Yeah.
So that's something else, isn't it?
It is a very unstable career, especially when you're starting. You know, there's no guarantee of work. There's no guarantee how much you're going to get paid. You know, a normal job, you know, I'll get this much a month. Whereas with freelance, you've got no idea, because it really does depend how much you work and what you're working on. So it is quite hard to sort of balance and manage your finances.
So if you're, I was just going to, expand on what Ash was saying, because if you're somebody that is itching to get your own place, you know, rightly so, to be able to, you know, be accepted to rent a property, you have to prove so many months finance that you'd be able to keep up with the rental payments and things like that. So I suppose, I don't know if you've made that transition now, Ash.
So for renting, for me, they asked for my last 3 years of tax returns. So that's also something as well. If you're self-employed, you've got your own freelance business, you have to do your own tax return. I'm seeing some terrified looks around the room. It's not as daunting as it sounds, it's more of a pain in the ass though.
Yeah.
But it is a very important part of it, because you don't pay tax at source like you do, say, if you work in Next or a bar, you're on pay-as-you-earn contracts. And, you know, for some stuff in film and TV, you will be on pay-as-you-earn. Like a lot of runners are pay-as-you-earn, so you will be taxed at source. But for other stuff, you won't. You know, some runner jobs aren't taxed at source. So then it becomes a little bit about keeping track of, where have I paid tax already? Where have I not paid tax? And the best thing to do is really be organised with that. Keep a spreadsheet of your earnings, what you're spending. So that doesn't mean like McDonald's meal every so often. That's not part of the expenditure unless it's on a job. It's if you're buying equipment, you should be keeping note of all that, because that can be offset against your earnings, so you don't pay as much tax. So that's something worth bearing in mind. But if for stuff like that, get some sort of financial advice. So perhaps an accountant or a family member, just someone to sort of guide you through that process. Right.
Yeah, do you think being hyper-focused aids you when it comes to working under pressure?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, the BFI short I was on the other week, we found out that the lead actress needed to leave that evening earlier than planned. So it was a bit of a scramble to go, right, how do I streamline the coverage we've got to still make it work and look good, but to get us out earlier than we need to be? So it was sort of a 5-minute mad look at the shot list and flick through everything and go, right, we can lose that, we can lose that, we can lose that, we can merge that. A little bit of sort of crazy kind of, you know, in It's Always Sunny when he's got the board. It's like, that's exactly how I felt in that moment. But yeah, so it does help. but also it can be quite overwhelming sometimes. You know, there's a lot going on in my own head, let alone outside of it. Oh, sorry, go on.
Does that happen quite often then? Because, say for example, like when I on a shoot and stuff, a couple of weeks ago we had a model and I arranged everything and we literally had an hour left until we had to vacate the room, sort of thing. We got really good shots in that time, but we had to basically like, right, no, you get there now, we're doing this and that.
Yes.
And we got some good shots out of it in the end, but like it was very intense for like that hour. We just had to like kind
We
of
were
crack on.
stressing,
And
yeah.
it was just like sat there like, yeah, no, you do that
Yeah.
pose now. Right?
All I'll say to that is, welcome to the film industry. No, there's times where it can be very intense and very focused like that and very stressful, and everyone just has to be doing their job at like 110% to make sure you make it happen. You know, the best laid plans, there'll always be a hiccup. Something will always go wrong. Perhaps the model will say, "Oh, I've got to leave in an hour," or you know, the lead actress then says, "Oh yeah, I've got to go at this time." It's like, well, we've planned the whole day around you being here till this time. You know, so stuff like that will always happen. You've just got to take it in your stride and go, right, how do we fix it? How do we've got this sort of bump in the road, how do we make what we need to make work with that? It's hard sometimes, you know, it's really hard, but it's the job. It's problem solving. Filmmaking is mostly problem solving at its heart. No one else? We've got to, you were slightly quicker.
What's your process behind planning shots?
That's really good. I mean, I'll talk about this from a couple of different perspectives. Firstly, narrative. So anything that's a bit more structured, I'll get to know the project. So whether that's a script, if it's a film, or the song, if it's a music video or something like that. Really get to know what the core meanings and feelings are behind that project. You know, I'll sit and I'll read through the scripts and I'll make notes as I'm reading through it, and then I'll have a conversation with the director. You know, how do you feel about this world? What does it look like to you? You know, whether that's perhaps a colour or an emotion, or perhaps even a reference from another film. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example now. For the narrative, for the interactive short I did, a lot of the reference material for that was sort of alternate 80s kind of vibe. So it's like futuristic, but also set in the 80s. So there was a lot of stuff like Cyberpunk and Blade Runner. There were sort of references for that. And me and the director would sit and just chat about, the scenes and the emotions and what colour do we see here. And that helps you plan sort of the lighting and start get a feel for, what it should look like. And in terms of shots specifically, there's always a little bit of flex to be applied to that, because sometimes on the day the actors will say, "Oh, well, what if we come over here rather than over here?" And it then means I need to rethink my coverage because there's an eye line change, or they've moved to a different part of the room that we didn't anticipate. So then it becomes, how do we sort of work that in with the lighting and the camera move to sort of make it all come together? Some stuff is really meticulously planned, like the World War I short. Every single shot of that was storyboarded, and we knew exactly what we were getting when we went into it. Nothing really changed on the day, which is quite rare. There's always going to be a little bit of blocking or something that changes, but that was pretty much set in stone, quite rigid, because we constructed sets for it. So we could only look in certain directions. So we were a little bit limited, but it's about embracing those limitations sometimes. For projects that have a little bit more flex applied to them, so perhaps it's a corporate piece and you're shooting in a company's office and people doing work and stuff at computers, you can possibly visualize the kind of shots you want. But then you need, are there interviews? Are they talking about specific stuff? What shots do I need to make the video come together? And sometimes that's a case of making it up on the day, going in with perhaps a little kind of rough plan. So it really does depend on the project. You had a question?
I was going to ask you, so when it comes to working under pressure,
yeah,
do you have any specific techniques, be it like breath work, to kind of recenter your focus?
That's an interesting question, and the answer is not really. It's a good question. Not really. I think personally, I just try and remember to breathe, and then just try and focus in on what I need to fix in that moment and kind of block everything else out. But I don't really